is direct marketing making a comeback in 2026? Why did Jaguar throw out 100 years of brand equity overnight? And why is one of the most respected marketers in the country telling me on this podcast that marketers have lost their seat at the top table and it's our own fault? My guest today is Michael Durie. He started as a cadet at the New Zealand Herald and has worked with Mazda, Telecom, New Zealand Post, Australian Post, and some of the biggest corporations in Australasia. Today, he runs Durie Hill and Associates, chairs the Marketing Association in the South Island, and sits on the board of Business Mentors New Zealand, helping lots of startups and businesses, which is amazing. I've heard people describe him as the Godfather of marketing in the South Island, which I think is pretty cool. In this episode, we get into why everyone's piling into social media is killing their own cut-through, when Steve Jobs was right to ignore his customers, the leaky bucket problem most businesses don't see coming, and why AI is a great thing, but what does it really mean for the next generation of marketers? He tells me about the campaign that took Mazda from 3% to 5% market share, and he tells me why the most powerful marketing move you could make might be just picking up the phone. He is, without question, still the most curious person in the room when I go to events. He's always asking questions and is always open-minded. I love it. Welcome, Michael Durie, to Marketing Masters. I'm very honoured to have you, dialing all the way up from Christchurch, I believe, on this fine day.
Exactly. Thank you very much for having me, Zania, and it's a pleasure to be on your show. I've watched it and learnt a lot from it, and you've had some amazing speakers on it. So yes, I feel really honoured and to be part of that. So thank you.
Well, I'm really grateful to have you here. I've heard someone described you as the godfather of marketing in the South Island. Kind of was like, wow, it's like I kind of had a picture of you being the godfather, meaning like not the mafia, but like
No.
yeah.
Well, that's a high bar to live up to, and I think there's probably plenty of other practitioners and marketers who qualify probably better than I do. But I will say that I have been around the traps a long time, and I certainly have worked both inside the industry and around the edges of it in so many different ways, and I've seen it sort of if you like. Converge into a whole range of things that I'm involved in that are involved in marketing and involved in sales and customer communications, as well as a whole range of other things. So it's a nice to be put on that pedestal, but I don't really feel I deserve it because I'm still learning and still looking at ways to get better at it. So it's a flattering, but not necessarily something I would probably go around and wear on my sleeve. But I do believe that it helps me have some credibility in being able to give back to a lot of the younger marketers coming through and businesses that I've helped as well. So it's been an interesting journey over a number of years. I've done a lot of different things, as we'll cover, I'm sure. But the majority of it is mostly to enjoy what I do and also to have something to offer, businesses, people, whatever it might be, and to walk the talk as best I can and do so, honestly and truthfully. So there's a lot of things in that, but but it's been fun and being experienced along the way does help, having something to offer. Yeah.
So what is the biggest misconception that founders and business leaders have about what marketing actually is? Like, what do they think?
Yeah, I think I look back at and think of the ones I've helped over the years, and particularly founders. I've had a few startups of my own, and I've also worked a lot with them through the work I do and as almost a professional mentor, if there is such a thing, and consulted as well to those small businesses. And there's a founder's sort of dilemma where you're so busy working in the business, it's hard to actually step back and work on it. And the most successful startups are those who recognize these shortcomings early on and then bring in people or expertise or even technology that can help them. The amount of businesses that I see transitioning into sort of an AI assistant or agentic kind of helping hand is significant, in that they're trying to reclaim some of that time and effort that they spend on all the things they don't necessarily like doing, and they'll default to things like marketing automation or even outsource it to a third party, whatever that may be. So there's I think as particularly young businesses, as they evolve and grow and develop, they start to realize they can't be all things across the board. They have to build their team is quite critical. But sometimes they'll build the specialists that can help them build the product, but not necessarily do the leadership. And that's something that I think founders really not only struggle with, but they also try to juggle so many balls in the air that there's a risk it'll drop. One of them will drop and then the whole thing will tip over. So I talk to a lot of founders, particularly those that are young, coming through university and coming out of some of the local startup incubators and groups. And, they all kind of have this fear of failure, but also imposter syndrome, I think, is quite strong in there as well. But there's also the belief that they can do anything. But in terms of marketing, I think the ones who are aware of this start to then say we need to build expertise both within the company or bring in someone outside who can help us. And that's where I've often gone in and worked hand in glove with some startups who I've seen really succeed. And often they'll outgrow me because they go international or they want to, employ their own team and people and so on. That's great because then they're starting to become a market-led, customer-focused entity. And, there's a lot of interesting examples of tech companies who have come out of nowhere and have started with an idea or a dream and are really getting there. And the ones who stick at it and see it the whole way through, that's the biggest buzz I get from being able to say, yeah, I help steer them on that path, but it's really their job to take it the next step. And, the good ones never let you down. They just keep at it and keep at it. It's that perseverance, that commitment, that consistency, that drive to keep going, So, yeah, there's definitely challenges. And a lot of them are, if they're building a tech company, they might have a tech background. They might be an engineer or a software developer or whatever, and that's fine. But they do all eventually realize marketing is an essential part of the soup that they need to have to work in their favor. And
do you think that they launch things and think people will just come?
Well, some do. I think some of them have the idea that if they can just get particularly raise the money, to build the company, get the team on board who all do things, and then just put it out there. And there's this fail fast mentality. You get this whole, let's just go for it and we'll build the airplane while it's flying type approach because that's what they have to do, or they're told to do, or they see that as the only way. And I actually see. Some of the slow but steady businesses actually do well in the long run. There's no one right way or another, but the ones who take stock and think it through and really understand, it's not a speed competition. It's to be able to get to the right numbers in the right way with the right resources and meet the needs of their customers. And so, I've seen both of those models, and there is definitely I guess the pressure of, it's all going to happen sooner than later, and I get that. But in terms of long-term success, maybe just stepping back and realizing your shortcomings, or at least recognizing that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And there is a desire to I don't think you need to get it right, every time, because you do that, you lose a lot of energy and momentum. But if you at least take a calculated risk and launch a product and get it out there, and then build, a robust systems, whatever that may be, agile, scrum methodologies, all these things, that can help and give you a higher chance of success. Because when you're borrowing other people, or using other people's money, I should say, to invest in you, you've got, a lot of responsibility to ensure you do the best. And that's a big struggle for a lot of young startup businesses. And I've worked with all of them really in some way, shape or form. And I'm really proud to say I've worked with some amazing successors who have gone on and done interesting things. And some of the founders are very young as well. And that way, they're learning all the way. And I'm hoping in a few years' time I'll see them, reach the potential they have, or become global businesses, or the next big thing, if you like. Yeah, and there will be some coming out of this part of the world. Not just the South Island, but New Zealand Inc. in total. Because there's amazing that's everywhere here.
Do you want to name a couple of examples?
Well, Halter is one that springs up because they've just done some amazing capital round. They've I saw them when they were competing in some of the agri-tech competitions held down here in Christchurch, and they're one company that stands out. We've got other businesses who took 10 years and have become an amazing success story, like Seequent, who are a tech company based in Christchurch that have got a valuation in the billions now. They're part of a global. They were bought out a couple of years ago, and and it took 10 years, I think, from about 2010 to about 2020, 21, when they sold out, and it's still based here, but that's a really amazing success story that flies under the radar in many ways. So there are some interesting young businesses, some interesting ones who've been more advanced, and there are some who have probably not done so well because there's been a hype cycle built around them, and a lot of expectation, and and I don't want to name names in that regard, but it is certainly that there is no one secret measure of success except the ability to just keep the balls in the air as best you can, and not drop too many. Every business that I've worked with makes mistakes along the way, and suffered for it sometimes, but many of them crack through it and become really good success stories and household names eventually as well. And and there are some that have been amazing innovators. I mean, one of the standout businesses down here is Hamilton Jet, and that started off as a jet boat company for adventuring up up in countries, and for sports and all those sorts of things. And now it's a global powerhouse of electric engines and jet engines and technology, basically. And they're on an expansion here in Canterbury, and are doing amazing export work. So normally those success stories do have an export focus as well, and I think that's the exciting part of a lot of this. And they're all marketing companies, at the end of the day, and that's why I think the marketing piece is such an important part of the whole jigsaw, because it enables them to pull together, their vision into something that actually means something to the customer. And it won't succeed unless it does have that connection. Whether it's selling jet engines or aeroplanes or Rocket Lab and rockets, we still need to have a customer, and we still need to have a value proposition that really cuts through, that says, we do the best we can. And those smart businesses, they really do, work it hard at the early stages all the way through, and they want to keep getting better along the way. And so I think that's quite exciting.
Do you have an unpopular opinion about marketing?
Well, only that I sometimes think there's so much focus on the marketing plan and not enough on the marketing planning. It's the difference between writing the document and putting it away and thinking your job's done. And in actual fact, it never stops because it's an evolving thing. So I've seen a lot of marketing plans come my way, and they're often, put up there as examples of, well, we've done it, we've gone through, we've done all the different elements of it, only for real life to take over, and the business reverts back to its original default of, doing the same thing the same way. And often it's not sold necessarily well to the top table, the owners, the key stakeholders in the business. So it may be a good stake in the ground document to say, let's go, here we are, we've done it. And the champion of it, the CMO and that individual or team have done that, tick that box and so on. But a lot of what goes on is I have seen this, it's out of date the minute it's signed off. It becomes redundant. The market's changing, it's dynamic, it doesn't serve a purpose. So that's one that sticks to mind. But I think listening to customers can often be the biggest mistake as well, because customers, I remember, I do believe in it, don't get me wrong, but I also believe that we can over listen to what they tell us and make decisions on it when what they're telling us is not the best feedback.
Have you got an example?
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, I look at an example like Steve Jobs, who never much took notice of customers anyway, because he just said, well, I know I mean, he was on the other extreme of the scale of believing he knew everything better than everyone else. But customers, he said, well, you don't listen to them to give you, I mean, it's good, useful feedback, but not necessarily the decisions that you need to take, because he knew better, and he took a much more product focus or product led focus on what the customer should have, and believed in himself strongly enough. I don't think businesses.
I think I remember. I think your example. I think there was a story, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, where it was they did do some customer research asking, and it was in the preparation of when they were launching, getting rid of CDs and trying to create Apple Music. And they were like, would you want this device that would let you have music and you could listen to music anywhere, and you pay a subscription? And people were like, no, I've got tapes and CDs and records and I would never want that. I'll have to buy, I've just bought everything. Why would I get rid of it? And then next thing you know.
It's exactly right. I mean, he was vehemently opposed to to wires, like having everything. He needed things to be wireless, because he said that's the future, and the future has proven him right. He had a very strong vision, and he wasn't going to deviate. And I see that with Musk, Elon Musk as well. I mean, these are people who have a supreme confidence in their own ability to predict the future or understand what the market should have. They don't care about competitors. They don't care about the norms, if you like, of what the market should want. And the old saying, if you ask the customer what they would have wanted 100 plus years ago, when it came to cars, they would have said, a faster horse, not a four-wheel car, and so these are the sorts of paradoxes we go through as to change that thinking. And I think some of the real sharp innovators coming through New Zealand and overseas are thinking that way. They don't want to go when everyone's going this way, they'll go the opposite way and think right outside the box, so far that the box doesn't exist, and see what happens. I see that in energy, I see it in social housing, all those sort of fundamental type areas, and I see it in marketing as well, where you get campaigns that you kind of scratch your head and think, what's going on here? And they're more or less taking you down a whole different path of, we only have to take Jaguar, for example, which their latest campaign, which was, has still got people talking because, and it's like, well, we didn't see that coming. And what are they doing to their brand? They're throwing it all out and
the pink and the blue spaceship looking Jaguars.
Product design and the way it's communicated, the way they're positioning that brand, they're taking out all the traditions have all been thrown out. And I mean, it's a high risk approach, and it doesn't always work. And I think there's still, opinions divided about that and whether it's succeeding or not. I mean, it's changing the narrative for them, but also are you running the risk of losing your embedded customer base, which I think a risk they were willing to take. So there's examples of those outliers and thinkers and entrepreneurs and people that I think are shaking it up, and I quite like that, in terms of never get too complacent or too comfortable, because it's in the outer edges where the real change happens. That, to your question, I mean, to my mind, that does go against what we all learnt at, you listen to your customer, get close to them, and have a passion for them. And I still believe that. Absolutely. I believe in, you need to understand your customer and develop a relationship with them and all of that. But there are those who throw that up and say, let's just move into a whole different area and find a new market and shift over here. I've seen it. I think Nike might have done that as well, or have said, well, we're over this market, we're going to pivot across over to here. Whether it succeeds, it takes time. And those large brands have done that every now and again just to shake it up. And it doesn't always work. Cherry Cola or Cherry Coke, I think, was one of those. They try different things, they do different things. They're just trying to obviously keep up with where the market is going to be, not where it is today or even tomorrow. Yeah.
So talking about that, new businesses and innovation and doing things differently, when these new businesses are launching or when businesses are looking to, I suppose, evolve, social media is one of the channels among others that they have at their fingertips to use. Do you find that a lot of them are leaning into it too much, and that what does a smart approach to marketing look like, and not depending too much on social? Like, what is the balance?
I think there's a real sense of FOMO with social media. If you're not in it, you're missing out, and you're missing out opportunities, particularly when you hear these success stories of, social media campaigns that are getting amazing results, or, the new trends going on in the SEO market and all these things. So, for a lot of marketers, I think they see it as what do we call it, a easy entry point into marketing, because it's relatively accessible. It's relatively ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And, and if you're not on it, then you are missing out to some degree. So you feel compelled that you've got to follow the herd and dive straight in. The danger is that by doing that, you're just adding to the noise factor and becoming, mistaking free and cheap and accessible and everything for results the other end, because what's happening, it's kind of like the law of diminishing returns. The more we all go down the same path, the harder it is to actually get real cut through and real results and unique results that aren't costing us an arm and a leg, because concurrent with that is the cost of reaching your market, or the cost of actually having that exposure does go up, even though, free is a misnomer, really, because there are costs.
Not free.
No, and it's the opportunity costs. You've got to then think. The amount of effort you have to do now to curate your story. The ability to keep it on brand, the desire and need to do it well and be able to get results, that you can put on the table. We're drowning. What is the old saying? We're thirsting for knowledge, but drowning in data. There's so much of it out there now, and we're getting a lot of stats and figures and all the rest of it. But, the counter to that is, well, if you spend that much more, the results will go up, but not necessarily. And I've seen where, budgets of campaigns I've worked on where we keep ramping it up because the algorithm tells us to, and find that, we're not getting the results no matter how much money we pour into this. So there's this sort of false economy about it, and there's also the time, energy, and effort you have to take in order to get those results and to quantify it, and we went from this whole click metrics and eyeballs and all the other thing into now, how do we equate that to bottom line results that bring in the business? So there's still that gap and that perception of, cause and effect, and how are we actually seeing that come through. So social media, I do see it as part of the landscape today. And I encourage businesses to get on board, but be careful that they're not sacrificing other channels that may be more effective or maybe more targeted to their audience, that create that kind of more rounded approach to building their brand or getting the sales results they want. Putting all your
what would that look like? Like, what are those kind of
it's
considerations or everlasting?
Going back to my old learnings from the multimedia approach, or building a campaign that actually has a whole range of different elements to it. They used to call it the above line versus the below line. It was all built on commission bearing media that has sort of morphed and changed along the way. But I see resurgence in certain media options now that are really coming into their own. The out of home media, for instance, and more sort of activation level type media, where brands are using events or using sports or using video games to get their message across to their various audiences, or going back to some of the traditional print media, for example, or radio is really having a resurgence, and the growth in podcasting and webinars. All of these things are providing viable alternatives, and it's not either or. It's not just saying, well, we'll delete this channel at the expense of another. It's more just how do you find that perfect fit of media balance between, what is going to connect with our audience, what is going to generate the response we want out of that audience, and how do we build a strong brand whilst building a sales-driven response. I guess in my day of learning and teaching marketing, I've always said, there's a big picture of channel selection, and you can, pick and mix and create a nice menu of options within your budget and what your cost per acquisition is. So I think the smarter marketers today are really understanding that it's not a one size fits all approach, and not everything needs to go down the social media roadway. We start looking at, okay, how do we fill it, bring in some of these other channels and start experimenting more. The old test and learn element comes into its own, and it may be a sacrifice between we need something today versus something that's got long-term brand build valuation, and you might need to sacrifice some of that speed to take stock of production timelines and that sort of slow burn approach. But I think it's worth taking that, doing that in order to see what does work and what.
Do you see with the businesses you work with, is there a grouping or channels that you find work again and again and again, and like there's a sort of a secret recipe that you've created where you kind of pull it out and you go, well, this has worked before, I'm going to try it again?
Wow, that would be wouldn't it be wonderful? Yeah. Because we live in such a changing world that nothing stands still for long. But I've worked on lots of campaigns, and some of the ones that have really surprised me have tended to work using old school media, direct mail. I mean, I've worked in direct mail a long time, and I've always been an advocate for it, but I see it coming back again because we're using it as a way to get cut through and to stand out, because if everyone's over here in the online space, what does stand out when it comes back to it? And even creative, what I call guerrilla marketing techniques, on the backs of buses or pop-ups or whatever it might be, there's a whole range of things that I think are quite interesting, quite exciting. They need a little more work on them, but when they do, you only need I think, what was the brand that came down to Christchurch recently was IKEA. I mean, they brought a pop-up store down here, put it in the middle of town, and for a couple of weeks that was drawing in people who were curious. It was like a art gallery pop-up to the IKEA brand. Those sorts of things get the city humming, or the market humming. Car companies do this well when they, when you walk around a mall today, a shopping mall, and you'll see car brands, on display in some of them empty shops or in the middle of a mall, but they're creating a sense of excitement or curiosity and that type of thing. So when you see that, or when you go to a sports match and you see some of the halftime events that they put on, I think whether it's rugby or whatever sport it is, there's some really interesting examples. So to me, some of those classic examples or tropes of marketing are sort of coming back into their own, or they're being considered again, purely because they do stand out and they create a sense of interesting and uniqueness in the brand. So and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money as well, and that's a beauty, I think, of some of the campaigns that we're seeing, that you can actually be quite creative with limited budget, and some of the small, smarter brands who are doing this, the cheeky ones, are really, doing some quite exciting things. Sort of a cosmetic brand down here called Bonnie, and it's only started, I think, a year and a half ago, but they've been doing pop-ups, they've been doing sort of roadshow stuff around the country, really building an online profile. Social media is front and center, but the whole thing is done so well that it's bigger than the budget I know they have, and it's creating a buzz, and that's the type of brand to watch. I think there's a drink company like Moody, and some of those ones have done equally as well, just by being a little more creative in how they've been, one of those perfect guerrilla marketers. They try different things. Two Dudes is another one. They're a men's cosmetic brand that they do amazing stuff. They do online comms really well, and they're backing it up with in-store merchandise and closing the loop, with the customer that's looking for something a bit different or looking for a brand that resonates with them. So those are the sorts of marketers, I think, doing interesting and exciting things that that are smart and tailored for their audience very well. Yeah.
So if a founder walked in tomorrow and they launched the website, they had the product, they put it up,
Yep.
and they're like, oh, shiz, it's not selling. And they come to you, what's the first three questions that you ask them? What are you wanting to get out of them to help figure out how to solve the problem?
Yeah, I think the first one is really understanding what the big problem is with their customer. What problem are they solving that they need to figure out, and are they doing it well enough as it is? Because that's the disconnect. What does the customer really want? So I think that is the first sort of question, and the other one is more, how are they going to manage their resources well enough to actually do that? Because often a startup or a founder with a limited budget will go off and, it's the old pray and spray. What do they call it? They spray
pray.
Pray and pray, and just hope that the whole thing. And it's really, figuring out where the best results will come from. So I often think it's understanding what the gap is and what the problem they're solving happens to be, and it's also how are they using their resources currently, and what can that tell them? And the third question, I think it's
how much money have you got?
Yeah, well, that's a good one. Often never enough, never enough to do what they want to do. But it does boil back to that, I think. It comes back to those use of resources and being able to say, okay, if you had to do one or two things, what would they be to move the dial, because I think for some of them, some of those startups and smaller businesses, it doesn't have to be a startup. It could be a retailer who's just stuck. They often stall because something's not, it's not moving. The stock's not turning over. There's something in the supply chain. They're having to battle costs spiraling. I mean, we're seeing that with
petrol.
Fuel and all those things just going through the roof. I mean, those are unknowns, so you've got to deal with the known unknowns as well as the knowns, and start to think, what can we do to stay in the game, and it's not just a tactical one step, but it's that sort of strategy you need to reset in order to think, okay, let's put our resources into something that we think is going to be really helpful. I think businesses generally, at the moment, particularly small businesses, are all kind of struggling with some really fundamental things, and a lot of it is customer attrition. They're losing customers they might have without understanding why. And two, it's finding customers to replace them, so the leaky bucket doesn't sort of get on top of them, and and it starts biting into the bone of their core business, and seeing their margins drop and their profitability drop, and then they're sort of on the treadmill, just standing still while they're trying to invest to grow or to know what to do next. And that's when, and I've been involved in some businesses who I've mentored and coached and helped, got to that point. And, and if it's on a downward spiral, it's very hard to pull that out at such a late stage. But if you get to it early on, you might be able to make a difference and change that direction somehow, and just by some smart tweaks that can make a difference.
And are the tweaks things like actually asking the customers who left why they left, or like what is the
absolutely
how do you
yeah, that's one of the things I was going to say, is that the first thing is to reach out to your customers to just ask them, what's working, what's not, what is the gap between, meeting expectations. I think you've got to really start at that point. I mean, despite what I said earlier about listening to customers, I actually think it's essential you do, particularly when you want to either get better or improve, or there's a problem that you need to fix. And if it's, generally comes back to the customer most times, then you've got to find out. And that's one of the things I would say, if you had to start somewhere, just reach out to a handful of those customers, 3 or 4 or 5, and just say, pick up the phone and ring them, email them, whatever that relationship is, just to say, look, we're just taking stock of where we're at, what is the nature of our relationship, are there any risks we need to be aware of, or exposure we need to be aware of. That is, I think, an essential part of it. And they always say, the only way to grow a business is to, find customers or keep your customers or grow them, find ways to expand the value you deliver to them. And in tough times, even more so, so you invest in the ones you have particularly. And I think that's a big part of it, is that you don't let them just walk out the door and take their business. And that leads to another point too, that silence from your customers is not good, because if you don't know and they walk away and it's too late, they've already drifted away or migrated elsewhere for whatever reason, then, winning back those customers can take a lot more money and investment than getting them in the first place. So yeah, there's a range of tactics and ideas, but you've just got to watch the warning signs and be really aware that when there are warning signals or problems emerging, to jump right in and find out the cause or the issues, or is it, a friend of mine who runs a small business, and he really struggles with attrition, customers drifting away, and and I say, well, there's no easy answer, but you really have to go back to them and not let them just drift away, but actually try to win them back before they walk out the door, if you can, or if they have walked out the door, what is it going to take to get them back? Or how much value is that business bringing back into your business anyway? Were they the cost to serve, the investment you have to make to keep them happy and all the rest of it on board, maybe just too much. So there's the economics of it as much as there is the overall averting shrinkage and attrition and all of those horrible things that do affect businesses generally, lose, and it can affect them in significant ways. A large business, but with one large customer, you lose that customer, that could have major impacts on your whole workforce. And I have seen that with agents times, losing an account, and half the agency walked out the door, was marched out the door, whatever it is. So there's some real pain in that. If you're not aware of that or see the signals or be close to those customers and clients, then that stuff can happen.
But do you think at the end of the day, because I totally agree with you, but I do feel that sending an email or trying to do it through a survey or NPS, I feel like it's still, in my view, it's a good read, but to me, it doesn't feel as powerful as actually just having a conversation.
Yeah.
So and actually, like you said, ringing them and talking to
Yeah.
them and being a bit vulnerable and being like, you were a customer of ours for however long, why did you leave? What was it? And I think I've heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, that Jason Paris actually rings to get feedback, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard the rumor, and I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I think that's so cool.
Absolutely, and I totally agree. Is in that we can, pay lip service to, we listen to customers, and we send out the obligatory emails and and all these sorts of things, and honestly, it's not the hard and fast feedback that you need, and that often it has to come from the top. In fact, someone like Jason or some of those other leaders I've seen do that stuff, and they do such a good job of walking the talk, and they embed that culture. It's a cultural change inside a business, where if you have a good leader who understands the impact of customers as a major part of why we exist and how we stay in business, then they lead by example by getting close to those customers, not just the select few, but being accessible right across the board, even if you're running a larger business. And in a place like New Zealand, there's no excuse for not having that mindset or insulating yourself and saying, well, that's our sales department's job or our marketing department's job. The enlightened businesses, and I worked in a couple over the years who got that and really walked the talk when it came to getting out there and doing the round, and I think that's important. I've seen CEOs at Air New Zealand who've done that, gone out and carried the luggage and checked in people at the counter or done some of those things. I've seen small business owners who really are passionate about their customer communications to such a degree. So automating that stuff and using systems to do it by rote is not necessarily the authentic approach that a smart business will do. It's very hard when you've got a large customer base, of course, and some of the priorities are with the top tier. But I think being available, I worked for a telco years ago, and our policy was that it didn't matter who the customer was; they could always contact the CEO or someone at the top, and the senior manager. At all times and whenever they could. And we try to remove the barriers, and that sort of got lost sometimes when we brought in, what do you call it? Automated contact center, trying to get through some of the government agencies at times is impossible because they purposely build walls. So I think smart businesses are seeing technology as an enabler, not as a barrier to remove themselves from being able to be approached or contactable by their customers. And that's the exciting thing about marketing automation, technology, AI. It can help to create a more human experience, I'm hoping, and that's still a work in progress, of course, but there are some exciting things we can do with that.
What is the hardest challenge you've faced in marketing and how did you solve it?
Yeah. Well, years ago, I was still quite young, I guess, and I had a job working for an auto brand, Mazda, way back in the day, and I was given the task, and in that day we had passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles, light commercial vehicles, vans, utes, that type of thing. And the New Zealand marketplace was quite tough. We had high tariffs. We had the cars were expensive and getting more so. There were government regulations and so on. So we had a whole car yard or parking lot of unsold vehicles one year, and my boss said to me, well, your task is to move that stockpile of unsold vehicles and get them out the door. So I had to come up with a solution and a strategy, and it was one I'm quite proud of, but also was very hard at the time because we had a lot of strong competitors. There were some really good car brands doing amazing things at the time, but we were a very small percentage of the market space in New Zealand at that time, and so I thought, well, the best way to approach it is not to try and be all things to everyone, but and not compete at the big spend end of the market, but to do something more specific and targeted. So I got my first introduction to direct marketing, if you like, and I engaged a merchandise company to help with a sales incentive program. I engaged an agency to help with the collateral to support that, as well as a campaign to go into market using a list broker and a whole range of targeted sort of assets. And anyway, we did this. We had an offer of a $200 fuel supply for every sale. We had merchandise incentives for salesmen or salespeople that incentivize them to get rewards. We had reward catalogs. We had travel packages. So there was a kind of I guess a win-win-win type approach. The customer won, the sales person won, the dealership won, and so did Mazda, I guess. So we were all in this kind of approach. And so over a 3-month period, did the campaign, and I could see the needle shift. We had about 3 or 4%, and by the time we'd sold a few hundred vehicles after this campaign, we were up to about 5% market share, and that had a massive impact on bottom line. And I was proud of it because, one, I really understood the power of data and the power of insights around our market. Were mostly farmers and small businesses, tradies, that type of thing. So we had to really understand who they were, where they lived, how to get to them. And this was well before the days of high automation and data analytics. We just used, some of it was best guess, but the agency were really good, and they created a whole range of creative. And the budget to do so was relatively affordable for a small brand like us. So I was quite pleased that we could do something very targeted and effective, and got the results that kept the top table within the business quite happy, our shareholders, stakeholders, that type of thing. And I say it was hard because I'd never done this thing before. I was very young and new to it, and it was my first real experience of really having to go deep into what a campaign could look like from start to finish. So I was only in my early 20s when I did this, and it was a fantastic learning curve, and it also brought in the whole concept of teamwork and how powerful specialists and skills that can create a winning campaign. So that worked on that level, and and I've had others that didn't work quite so well, and of course for equally the same sort of results. The wrong target, the wrong not the right channels, not the right budget, and we used mostly direct mail for this one, with telemarketing as part of the follow up, and those were the key channels. So it was a good project, but also a pretty tough one at that time. But it did get the results, and I was quite pleased with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, getting the results is what it's all about. Like, if you can
Exactly.
get those, then you're winning. But,
yeah, well, that's right. That's right.
Curious, and it's a bit of a pivot, but like, do you have, if you're a small business in New Zealand and you have maybe a retail store and an online presence, what do you think a marketing budget would look like for a small business? Like, if someone's kind of trying to figure out where should their budget be month to month, and like, I think I've heard, you hear the adages of your marketing budget should be 10% of your total revenue, or and then like 60-40 of that would be awareness to
Correct.
to performance, and like all the kind of theory. What is your kind of recommendations on that?
I guess you could benchmark it against your competitors. I mean, that's one way of doing it. And sometimes, but nowadays it's very hard to know what your competitors spend. I mean, you can see evidence, but it's impossible. You can look at it as a percentage of sale. You can look at it as a percentage of turnover. It could be, and the most common one for small businesses tends to be pluck it out of thin air and just have look at it as let's just allocate a certain amount and use that as our guide stick and see if we need to go over or under by the time we wrap up the year. Small businesses really struggle with that question because they don't know what they don't know, and there's so many pressures. If you talk to people in the media, they go on door knocking and they will try and tempt a business into their channel no matter what. And I get it. That's their motivation to do that. But a small business who could be a retailer or could be a manufacturer or whatever, many of them don't have any budget at all, to be fair. They kind of see it as a cost that, it's not an investment, it's a cost. So therefore it's an overhead they don't really want to carry. And, I know from experience, a lot of manufacturers don't even have marketing person or a responsibility or a category or a budget for that matter. So to your question, and I've always said this when I've taught marketing, it really just depends on so many unknowns that are happening. It could be, what is the situation of the marketplace today? Is the audience growing or shrinking? Is
retracting?
Retracting, and that might have a say. Is there a deal on the table? Because a lot of during certain months of the year, there's certain deals being made around billboards or whatever it might be, print incentives, and it's hard to turn that up and then turn that off. And then you look at there's a magazine industry, there's traditional, there's all these things. So my answer is really it just depends, but try and take a realistic approach. Don't just throw good money after bad purely because it's something's walked in the door and the nice shiny thing that's come in front of you. The other thing is to really think about what your objectives are, and if you think it through, and a lot of small businesses are getting better at this. They really understand what they need to do, and they are absolutely laser focused on sticking to their knitting and doing it the way that gets them the best results that they know. The end result, to your question, is the best form of marketing in my book has always been word of mouth. And how do we sort of get to that point? So what are the levers to get to a positive word of mouth experience, and how much should we invest in each? And the levers, to my mind, are things like having really good quality customer service, good quality product, and amazing marketing. And that's kind of like the bottom line of what makes for great word of mouth that will generate, I wouldn't call it free marketing or advertising, but does work towards that. And that's actually that golden objective, getting to that point of, I've got all these raving fans out there, I've got all these amazing advocates, that are telling our story. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because we did do the good little things right. We did follow up. We did keep them informed, and we gave, no surprises when they get the bill. All these little things and are really strong determinants of what makes a loyal customer, and you work towards that, and you find a way without having to buy their loyalty, by offering more and more or giving more away. It's actually being quite strategic in how you do that. And I have seen some really successful small businesses do quite interesting things just by captivating that loyalty piece, using them to be your voice, amplifying your message, getting out there and telling the world, the 5-star rating, but not just through that means, but just by naturally telling others about it. And promotion money can't buy. Almost, it's investing in all the good things that make doing business with you. So the budget is kind of really dependent on what type of business you are, how you want to make a difference in creating that positive word of mouth and getting those raving fans out there. It's a good fun. The only way to really do it, improve it, is to experiment and try different things. I test and learn, we used to say, and that to me is the bottom line approach to it.
So with a lot of new students who are coming into the market and who are studying, and then with AI rolling out, and a lot of sort of feedback and the rumors are saying that it's really hard for them to get in at those entry level roles, because AI is kind of, I suppose, shifting the focus on that entry level work away to be able to be automated or done faster, 100 times faster than it was back in the day, and that you can create flows and things can just happen, and it's pretty incredible once you've kind of implemented it. How do these marketers then get a chance to get into this world that we're in?
Yeah. Well, it's a hot topic because obviously, businesses are worried about that, but so are graduates and marketing graduates who I talk to quite regularly. They're all fearful of what they hear and what's coming. The majority of them know that they have to learn, learn the tools to be prepared for what is coming and what is ahead, and that they need to be adaptable in order to shift or pivot to the roles that will be there in a few years' time. Programming roles are probably going to be tough. Campaign management type roles or account management roles might be difficult. What is going to be needed, though, are human skills, being able to understand, people, and being able to communicate well, and being able to, to bring together, knit together all of the technologies and the strategies and the ideas. So we still need people who are reasonably outgoing, reasonably well versed in how to communicate and direct, so treat the AI issue as an opportunity and as a way to position yourself even one step further ahead of the rest of the pack by just being that more, I don't know, strategic in your career. So, the universities at the moment, I mean, they've got a huge number of students who are learning marketing, and I do worry that there aren't the jobs coming out that are, or that they're prepared enough to get the sort of jobs that are out there, and businesses themselves are shrinking and cutting back on some of this. So the students do need to have the skills. They still need to understand the importance of understanding AI, because that's inevitable in a lot of ways, where it leads to and how they can prepare themselves for that next leap. They have to really showcase that to the best of ability. I do work with a number of job seekers through work that I do in presentations and training. And, I say, well, you've got to look ahead at, 3 to 5 years, what the job market will look like, but how well prepared are you going to be, and start thinking about it now so that you're at least, on that same wavelengths when the market itself starts to shift. So there are certain things that students study at university which I don't know are going to be really there in a couple of years' time, or even if they are there now. But there are others like, AI strategy or AI product marketing development type convergence in that space that will be probably, I think, quite needed and interesting. So understanding where the innovation piece fits into that, what the job market of the future looks like, and how well prepared are they towards getting that. Those are all questions I think. I mean, I wouldn't like to be facing them myself sometimes, because I think, gosh, it's like, where do we go? But even at the other end of the time scale where I sit, there's a lot of people who are well entrenched that are worrying about the next year or two, because the jobs we've taken for granted in the administration or, law maybe, or accounting may not be necessarily in existence in a year or two, or 3 or 4, whatever. So it's all coming together in a head at a much faster speed. It's not about just knowing certain tools, it's knowing the big picture so you can be really ahead of the game when the tide changes, or when the market turns, and have confidence in yourself and have belief in yourself to get out there. I mentor and help a number of graduates who have come out, and the ones I can see have got the edge are those who are not letting the negativity of the market get them down. They're saying, if I can't find the perfect job, I'll go and create one, or whatever it might be. So there's definitely you've got to have a bit of fire inside you to really get ahead of it. But it's possible and doable, and I think that's an exciting opportunity for young people.
I feel like
it doesn't all have to.
You've that song, you get knocked down, but you get up again.
Yeah,
that.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, I don't fun. Yeah, get knocked down. That's the way the market is. It's been for a long time. I mean, back in the day when I went through university, I was studying law, and then I changed career direction because that same year there were more law graduates than jobs, and I thought, well, I don't want to be an unemployed lawyer. Why did I think of another role? And that's how I got into advertising, by applying for other jobs in different areas, and happened to fall into that, and that
Was it a book?
never
you read a book?
I
read
did read a book. When I was studying, I was at Whittaker University, and I used to hang out in the library a lot, and I read this book by David Ogilvy called Confessions of an Advertising Man, written in the 60s, but this was when I was at uni in the 70s, and it was already, had been around a while, but it was a real insight, and it gave me a sense of clarity around this thing called advertising. He was the original madman, and what really triggered that change for me was his belief in consumer behavior and understanding, and he had a saying like the customer is not a moron, she is your wife. And he basically said, the big idea in advertising is what counts. He really had a strong belief in imagery and copy working hand in glove together to create an ability to get cut through. And so he was a traditional ad guy, but it really opened up the blend of creativity and science, and how it could all work well to get a result that resonated with me. And I thought, that's the kind of industry I wanted to be in. And a year later, I got my first entry into that world, and in newspapers. And it sort of never looked back. And even though I've had all sorts of different jobs along the way, marketing has always been foundational to that. So it's always given me the ability to at least ask the right questions, or learn about customers or learn about business and see how it all fits. And it just I guess brings together the pieces of the puzzle into a way of saying, there's you can never assume anything, and some of those fundamentals don't change, but they do give you, I think, a strong set of skills to be able to apply, no matter where you are and no matter how far along the way you may be. Whether you're a large corporate or a young fighting entry into the market. And that's the beauty of being able to try different things, experiment, and and learn. Marketing is one of those skills that can, once you learn them, they can stay with you, and adapt, and as long as you adapt, can be relevant no matter where you are or what time that you happen to be in. So it's good fun, and I being part of it.
I think that when you hit on puzzle, to me, my kind of belief about marketing is that it is like a puzzle, and you test and learn over so many years, and you gather all this information, and then you start to see patterns, and then the patterns can be things that you can reapply again and again, and you can test and learn and see if they work in different industries for different businesses. And often, not all of the rule will apply, but parts of it will. So that whole testing and learning is critical. And then it's really interesting because a lot of brands, I think that, marketing's the colouring in department, or marketing is easy.
No.
And it's not. It's hard. And then when you do get results for a business, they're like, oh, yeah, cool. That's great. Thanks. But what do you think?
And that begs the question as to, its role in the senior executive level, because, I think it has been probably dismissed in a lot of organizations as not being essential to the business objective, or it's there to help the sales guy, the sales team look good, or it's there to run the hospitality program or whatever it might be, or do a bit of sponsorship, or and I am concerned that the role of marketing is not as well respected as it should be. And possibly it's our own fault as marketers for not convincing the top table, so to speak, CEO level, that we are essential to their success, because we do contribute so much. And I think that, it's all due to what results can we bring to make this business succeed or to survive and thrive. So there are definitely there is a job to be done there, and that does concern me that if we don't watch out, we'll be just relegated down the ladder of just subservient to all the other operational pieces in the business. And but marketing is it definitely has. It touches and there's internal marketing as much as external. There's the various stakeholders that are essential. Understand, there's the brand marketing side of the equation. There's the data driven type of thing. So there's so many elements that I think marketing touches on, and that are essentially important to most businesses I know. And the ones who dismiss it or don't respect it as such, well, I think it's only a matter of time before they start to become more redundant as the smarter ones step up. But we do need to have more marketers at that top table who really get it and have that cultural change and shift and respect that I think it deserves.
I think the biggest thing for me was in my career in marketing is that I've always been obsessed with the bottom line, like the number that the business is actually making. So I've
Yeah.
always tried to create a pattern between, or a connection between what we're doing in marketing and then how the numbers are shifting. If not, everything else is the same, and we're doing marketing is the kind of key area where we've got budget and investment to be
Yep.
able to try and shift that needle through
Yep.
multiple tactics. What is it that actually works? And so, for me, I think it's also marketers need to be more, don't just look at the vanity metrics and the nice kind of
Yep.
fluffy, like actually focus as well on how improving, how does your role in the
Yep.
business actually
Yep.
justify the success that you want
Yep.
to create. And yeah,
Measure the long-term effects as much as
yeah,
the
yeah.
day ones. I think, we've used things like net promoter scores and all of those things, but I do think that there is a soundness to that approach, at least to be able to hold the mirror up and say, yeah, we have seen a shift in attitude and behavior. We have seen, not just this market share, but, this mind share, this ability to really, connect with your customers so that they don't see any other choice, because you are front and center and first and foremost the choice that they wish to go with and invest their money with, So regardless of what you make, sell or produce, marketing is a key part of that. And, and in my role within the Marketing Association and other groups I'm involved in, I see it as, fundamental again to my mission is to get out there and, overcome all those misconceptions about what marketing is. See it as as an amazing profession for young people to get involved in, and to give something back as well, supporting other marketers to achieve their goals. And I think it can be a worthy industry to be part of, as much as it is, an essential one for the success of business and, at a broader level too, because it can contribute to job creation. It can contribute to, innovation big time. It can contribute to so many of these parts of I guess matching customer needs and wants and all those good theories and things that we grew up on into into a win-win type situation, which I think is is only fair. And yeah, there's some exciting things still to come, I think, in terms of where marketing's going and what it's doing. So yeah, we'll see some good changes coming through that will. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I find you're an impressive when I met you for the first time, and also even now when you, you've had 5 decades of experience in marketing and driving success and helping businesses, and yet you're still come across as the most curious person in the room.
Yeah, I am actually quite proud of that because I find the more I know, the more there is to learn. The more there is I don't know sometimes, and I'm the first to own up that. Gosh, there's so much. I mean, I was teaching digital marketing, and I think my students knew more about it than I did because they were of the right cohort and age and all that. They were dealing with it every day. I was just talking about it and trying to theorize on it, but it's an evolving industry and profession, and you're right. I find that it is fascinating, and I apply it in other things I do. Whether run my own startups, I've worked as a mentor, and I've own a retail store. It's all part of the learning has a relevance because I can apply it in those other areas. So those, to me, that's the beauty of being able to understand it and learn from it, and I wouldn't say be cynical about some of it, but I do question it more and more, because once upon a time I was very accepting. This channel or that channel was the only one, or this strategy was the only way. Nowadays, I think, there are other ways of doing it. There are better ways of doing it. How can we match that up and test it out and see if it does work without losing our shirts over it, and seeing it work. And when it's done beautifully and well, and you see it around you on some of the campaigns that we're familiar with, you think, yeah, what's the secret sauce with that? So that's a bit that I find interesting. And I know
Have you
you've
got?
done
Have you figured
talks
it
around.
out? What is the secret sauce?
Oh no, I haven't figured it out. But I do see examples. I know you've had people on the show, talking about the Tina from Turners, or the Stickman campaigns, and you think something so simple can just get it, and work so well. And what's the secret sauce around that? When you see a brand like, I'm trying to think of ones that have been around, but Specsavers doing interesting things with their campaigns, or Kit Kat, for an example, or Whittaker's. These are all brands who have evolved and have become part of the public consciousness of marketing, are doing things well in a consistent way. And they don't have to have big budgets, but they are, getting that kind of cut through because they're willing to stand up and do what they believe is right for their brand. And occasionally they'll topple over and fall over, but the ones who have real passion and what I say, are really clear
Curiosity,
about
like
their
you.
curiosity. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
At least give them a chance, and as I say, make mistakes, because that's the other part of don't be afraid to fail. I mean, I say that to students, and I say it to any marketer, that it's not wrong to make a mistake. It's not wrong to unless it's intentional and it's sabotaging something. But generally, mistakes are part of it. It's the I've worked on a campaign or two that have failed miserably, and and ended up costing as well. When I had an agency years ago, doing a few that didn't work, didn't get results, and we ended up having making no money out of it. That stuff happens. But I always think, if I don't want to make the same mistake twice, and I want to find a way to improve, and to what can it teach me? What can I learn from this? And just keep on getting on, get better the next time round. It is that you've got to, the test and learn thing should apply to yourself as well. What do you get out of that failure, or that ability to try and not quite make it, and have a go? I've started businesses that haven't, always gone as well as I'd like, and then ended up, having to pull out. And did I see it as a failure? Possibly, but if I haven't lost all my money, or gone down the rabbit hole, then I'm back up doing it again, because I want to prove I can and find new ways of getting there. So yeah, I'm happy to admit to making mistakes, and I'm happy to find ways to improve, and that's where that curiosity thing comes in. Because without that, I don't think I would feel like doing it all over again or whatever, but I don't see it stopping. So you just keep on keeping on.
I think that's why I love marketing, because I suppose the philosophy and a lot of the kind of key lessons, they stay. That,
Yeah,
the kind of Mark Ritson, the bothism, it's not traditional or brand and performance, it's both. And the kind of James Herman and all of these amazing, brains in the world who help marketers to be better. Um,
yeah,
but also that it's so like a lot of the stuff that you've talked about, the great examples are highly creative. And like
yeah,
even some of the things that Whittaker's did, where they did an Ed Sheeran limited edition bar, which probably was 5 printed bar wrappers, but it went
yes,
global. And like
yeah,
these are just that beautiful mix of being brave and trying something, being
yeah,
creative. And I think
yeah,
even Justin Moday talked about, some of the best ideas, like you said.
mm,
He talked about an idea which was activated in a stadium, in a
right,
sports arena, and I
yep,
think it was for Sky Sports, and like just that these ideas don't
yep,
necessarily have to have massive budgets, but that
no,
it's about the creative, and how can you get that attention, like.
yeah. Well, a few years ago when I worked for Australia Post, we sponsored the Sydney Swans and as well as the Australia Opera. And one game, big game in Sydney, we brought the two brands together. So we had the Sydney Swans game, which Australia Post basically sponsored for the whole event, and brought along lots of customers and stakeholders. And our entertainment that we use as a kind of an activation was bringing in all of the Australian opera performers to come in during the breaks in the game to go to rove around the audience of about 70,000 Sydney Swans fans. I can't remember who they were playing, actually. It might have been a Melbourne team, but it was a really amazing juxtaposition of totally different brands. But the one common factor was Australia Post as the overarching brand sponsor. And it worked really well as an activation, as a way of helping give a lot of profile to Australian opera, who needed that audience support, and the Swans itself, who were getting quite a fair bit of investment from us as a key sponsor. So all of those things can work exceptionally well, and I've seen it happen in all sorts of industries I've worked in over the years, and that's the fun part of it. And just finally, on that point, I also tell my job seeker students that if you want to stand out when you're getting out there and trying to apply for a job, do something creative or something different. And I've seen Lego sets that have been created like a CV. I've seen chocolate bars that have been like letters written in chocolate. Some creatives have done, and I think I use an example. I think Anna Mulbray from I think she previously wrote Zuru, but she had she told a story about an applicant for a job who created a cake, that was all handwritten. Buying for it. I thought that was fantastic. So there's a bit of creativity with a strategic kind of a message that gets the cut through. So, whether it's for you looking for a job or for, a big campaign in front of thousands, you can have the effect, and that's what marketing can do. It really brings together creativity, smart audience understanding and targeting, and creating a message that really resonates. And to me, that sums up why I do it and why I'm still passionate about it, is because it can surprise and delight and do all those wonderful things that really move that dial of, getting people to buy your story, basically, and understand and want to be part of it.
So if you were to wrap up this podcast interview with what you want the listeners to walk away with, that they can look to apply or do, not say for later, but on Monday morning or the next day, whenever they're listening to it, to actually go and do something, what would you recommend? Is it reading a book? Is it a podcast? Or what is it that you like? What is it that you recommend that they motivate themselves?
Yeah, I think if I was a business, my message would be, going back to what I said earlier, is talk to your customer, maybe on Monday, a customer. No, I'm not talking about the ones you've probably already programmed or planned or whatever, but reach out to those that you haven't heard from for a while, and just ask them how they're going and what's keeping them awake at night. What are those sort of issues that, because I think marketers, one of the other jobs of marketing is to solve problems and to take away the pain. So how do we do that? Well, we've got to listen and reach out and talk to our customers and talk to people who are important to us. And that could be staff as well. I mean, I'm saying customers, but it could be an internal customer, or it could be your boss even, listen, write it down. And I think the truth is that, it goes beyond just the sort of focus group stuff or the data itself. It's in being able to create an understanding and the ability to listen, before you just dive in and do stuff. And that to me is, that ability to sort of really get inside the head of who your audience happens to be. And one of the, I think I mentioned Steve Jobs earlier on. I mean, I think he was really good at articulating this, even if he wasn't always there to listen to customers. But he did actually, funnily enough, say that, you've got to get close to your customers. You've got to tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves. So that to me is saying, well, yeah, you can listen to them, but you've got to just sort of pick up the signals and the sense of what they are looking for, even if they don't know it themselves. And you can go away and create it and create a customer for life, And that's why I think there is a kind of a secret sauce somewhere in there that we're still looking for and discovering. But yeah, man, if you can crack that code, you've really got, I think, the essence of success. And whether you call it marketing or whatever term you want to, it's all just part of the whole package of, being there when you're needed and being able to be creative and using all those wonderful tools that we have at our disposal to stay relevant, because the world is changing and it's getting harder and murkier and all the rest of it. So, just don't let it get on top and just keep adapting and relevant to the end and seeing where it takes you. So I think there's some good things out there, and let's keep on looking for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I'm really grateful that you joined the podcast today, all the way from Christchurch. And it's been really wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Zania. And it's been a pleasure to be part of it. So we'll look forward to seeing you again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Take care.